Welcome to day 10 of Hammerween, and welcome to the lunar surface as we're talking about Moon 02 from 1969/1970. Thank you, first of all, to those who have sent their well wishes as I make my recovery from sickness. Hopefully, not be too long. But let's get into it, shall we? So, 1969, of course, Neil Armstrong has just landed on the moon. Hammer want to get some of that action. But they also want to have a Western in space, old school Flash Gordon type serial vibe. But they also want to have a kind of 2001 feel to it as well. So there's a real tonal issue going on from the very concept of the film, and indeed from the very opening of the film, because it starts with a Pink Panther like cartoon, very Warner's cartoon that kicks off affairs. So you think you're in for a comedy, then you're not. Our main astronaut here, our main character, is Bill Kemp, played by James Olsen. Down on his luck, he was the first man on Mars, and he was one of the great pioneers, and is now left as cargo pilot and doing freighter work, etc. Because mankind has stopped looking beyond the moon. Eerily prescient, considering that's what we literally did. We stopped looking beyond the moon in the 70s. He is basically a gun for hire, especially since this is a Western, really. He takes jobs doing freighter work, passenger work, ferry work, whatever needs done to pay the bills. And he's approached by someone who's clearly a villain because he's played by Warren Mitchell, first of all, J.J. Hubbard, but he's wearing a monocle, which is, rather telltale. Warren Mitchell says, look, there's an asteroid which is made of pure sapphire. I want to safely land it on the moon. And if you help me do that, you'll be sorted. I'll give you the best payday you've ever had. So James Olsen says, no problem with that. See you in a few days for the mission. B plot. Catherine Shell of Space 1999. So clearly she was attracted to moon projects. Catherine Shell has come to the moon to look for her brother, who's a miner. Again, very Western trope. And she's called Clementine, very Western. She's looking for her brother who has just like a gold prospector would have a, a claim to mine for gold for a set period of time on a set period of land. He has that for a part of the moon, but he's not been heard of for a few months. So she's looking, worried where he's got to, kind of thing. So she has the meet cute with James Olsen, and he says, well, I don't have to do that Sapphire mission for a few days for Warren Mitchell, so I'll come with you to the dark side of the moon and we'll look for your brother. They find the brother. At this point, folks, if you really don't want spoilers, believe me, you're going to know what happens. It's not that kind of film. If you've ever seen a Western, you know what happens here. At this point, they go to the dark side of the moon. They find the brother standing still. When they turn him round, he's a skeleton in a spacesuit. Very Silence in the Library, Doctor Who. Stephen Moffat must have seen this. Great imagery as well. Looks fantastic. Looks absolutely brilliant. And they're attacked at that point by three of Warren Mitchell's men. So why is Warren Mitchell trying to kill the astronaut that he's hired to do this mission for him to bring the asteroid down, which will bring him all sorts of wealth? Why is he doing that? Well, rather wonderfully, the A plot and the B plot tie in incredibly densely for a change. Catherine Shell's brother had a claim, as mentioned, but it was a fruitful one. It had a vein of, was it nickel or copper? But regardless, a precious metal, which is worth an absolute fortune. Warren Mitchell knew that, so bumped the brother off made sure that he stayed missing and not reported dead so that no one inherited it, so that Warren Mitchell can just buy the claim once the date expires, which we're at that point, just about that point. So if Warren Mitchell buys it, he can get the profits from the under the lunar surface itself, all the precious metal, and conveniently he has a place to land his own meteorite as it comes down. So why would James Olsen and Catherine Shell at this point continue to help in that mission to bring the sapphire meteorite down? Well, of course, it goes into the land of if you don't, I'll kill the girl, etc., etc., etc. There's a few shootouts. There's a few Western bar scenes, saloons with can girls, go girl type things. Very tropey, very familiar to anyone who's seen any films ever. But there's a terrific sense of fun around it, where everything that we're seeing from this point is being played to the hilt, especially when it involves Warren Mitchell, who knows the kind of thing that he's in. He's playing it very arch, but never camp, never over the top. But he's playing it as an unrepentant villain, a villain who enjoys his villainy. Catherine Shell, very earnest, very likable, of course. The issue with the film, really, James Olsen lets it down. James Olsen is a bit of a damp squib as a lead. He's not got the charisma that this film needs. I think if it was made a little bit earlier, they would go with someone a bit more Flash Gordon-y, with a bit more charisma. But 2001 has come out at this point, which had very down-to-earth, everyday astronauts. So I think that's what they were going for here. But he's so everyday that you don't really believe that, he's got the charisma to. I mean, he may have the charisma to be an astronaut because some of them are boring, but at the same time, he's not got the charisma to lead a film about being an astronaut, which is a very different role. Neil Armstrong couldn't have played Neil Armstrong in a film. So we've kind of just metamorphed into the review, really. But that's because the film itself does kind of peter out into exactly where this is going from around 40 minutes towards the end. You just know exactly where it's going. Is that a bad thing? I don't think so, because what it's going for is old-fashioned adventure, but with a fresh coat of paint. Clearly, someone has seen 2001 and said, "That's the future of sci-fi. Let's whiten things up. Let's have it look fresh." And someone else has said, "But what about the Western stuff?" And they've all decided, "Let's just do it all at once then." So it's kind of bonkers. It's kind of mental in that regard, where there's a very straight-laced sci-fi film here with a very straight-laced plot, but there's also a very silly, over-the-top Western sci-fi with a really wonderful villain and the sister who's looking for her, and the claim to the lands and blah 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 blah. Very fun, very adventure led, very over the top, very classic Americana really. And this film didn't do well in America, and frankly, I think it should have. I think it's a shame that this film appeared on something like Mystery Science Theatre because it appeared there and also in, what's it called, Golden Turkeys, which was a book that listed the worst films ever made in the 80s. And the films that were ascribed that back then often are just repeated as being amongst the worst films ever made, even though they're not. And this is one of them. This was cited as being one of the worst films ever made. I don't understand that at all. It's terrific fun. Some of the sets are fantastic. There's a wonderful score by, oh, what's his name? He did the score for the French Connection, Don Ellis. A wonderful score by Don Ellis. There's great performances throughout, apart from James himself. Um, I mean, his literal name, rather oddly, is Jimmy Olsen, but which maybe tells you he's not a lead, he's a sidekick. He's literally Jimmy Olsen. He's not a Superman, he's a Jimmy Olsen. But he doesn't let it down too much because when you are in the part of the film that is relatively straight sci-fi, he's fine. He's fine. It's just when you're now in the part that's Warren Mitchell, over the top, Banner Robin, um, steal my land, I'll kill the girl, kid. All that stuff, he's not suited for that kind of hero, that kind of Western ravishing outlaw type. No, no, not for him at all. Not for him at all. Bit of a rambling one today, but I think this is just an underrated, fun flick, which doesn't know what it wants to be. And that's part of the charm. It's all over the place. Roy Ward Baker directs it, who made some fantastic films, and you really get the sense that he does not know what he's trying to do here, or at least he's being pulled in different directions by the production of Hammer. Do the sci-fi stuff. 2001's been a big hit. We've just landed on the moon. It needs to look more realistic. People don't want camp. They want it to look photorealistic now, so you better do that. But wait, the plot's still very Western. How can I remedy these two things? And part of the charm is he doesn't remedy them. There is a tonal shift. There's a jarring chasm in the middle of the film. I kind of like that. I wouldn't say that it's so bad it's good. I think it's genuinely a fun film that's recommended. It's not a good film. It's not a great film, but it's a fun film. And it's an hour and I think it's about an hour and 40, which for Hammer is actually quite long. But an hour and 40, what's that? What's that these days when every film is 4 hours long these days? Come on. Highly recommended. Moon Zero 2. Hopefully a Blu-ray forthcoming at some point. But yeah. Well, hopefully I'll be returning tomorrow if I don't get any worse. And I'll see you then. I don't want to announce what I'm doing in advance at the moment because I'll be honest, I'm picking ones that I can toss off without having to think too much because the brain fog is very, very real. And believe me, this is a film where you don't have to think too much. So I'll see you tomorrow, folks. God willing, Godspeed, God Almighty.